The day my adoptive mother changed my life forever began like any other Thursday. I was at work, sitting at my desk in the cramped office of the small marketing firm where I had been employed for the past 6 years, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to balance and wondering if I had made a terrible mistake with my life. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, a thin film of cream congealing on its surface, and the fluorescent lights above my head were giving me a headache that pulsed behind my eyes like a second heartbeat. The office was quiet, the kind of oppressive quiet that descends on a workplace in the middle of the afternoon when everyone is too tired to talk and too busy to care. I could hear the distant hum of the copy machine, the occasional ring of a telephone, the soft click of keyboards from the cubicles around me. It was the sound of ordinary life, of people going about their ordinary business, completely unaware that the world was about to shift beneath my feet. I was 32 years old, unmarried, childless, and living in a one-bedroom apartment that I could barely afford on my modest salary. My life was not what I had imagined it would be when I was a young girl dreaming of the future. I had thought, back then, that by the time I reached my 30s I would be settled, established, surrounded by family and friends, and the comfortable trappings of a life well lived. Instead, I was alone. My adoptive father had died 10 years ago, taken by a heart attack that had been as sudden as it was devastating. My adoptive mother, the woman who had raised me from the age of 7, had become distant in recent years, not because she didn't love me, but because life had a way of creating distance between people who cared about each other. And my adoptive siblings, Catherine and James, had never really accepted me as one of them. To them, I was the outsider, the charity case, the stray that their parents had taken in out of pity. They tolerated me, but they never loved me. And I had learned to live with that, to accept it as the natural order of things. The phone call came at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. I remember the time because I had just glanced at the clock on my computer screen, calculating how many hours remained before I could go home and collapse onto my couch with a frozen dinner and a mindless television show. The caller ID displayed a number I didn't recognize, with an area code from the city where my adoptive parents lived, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. I was busy. I was tired. I didn't have the energy for another sales pitch or survey or wrong number. But something made me pick up. Some instinct I couldn't explain and didn't try to. "Hello," I said, my voice flat and professional, the way I always sounded when I answered calls at work. "Am I speaking with Elena Morrison?" The voice on the other end was male, formal, with the measured, deliberate tone of someone who was used to delivering important news. It was the kind of voice that belonged in a courtroom or a boardroom, the voice of authority and consequence. "This is Elena," I said, my heart suddenly beating faster for reasons I didn't understand. "Who is this?" "My name is Jonathan Whitmore. I'm an attorney with Whitmore and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of the estate of the late Margaret Morrison. I believe she was your adoptive mother." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs and leaving me gasping. Margaret Morrison, my adoptive mother, the woman who had taken me in when I was 7 years old, a traumatized orphan with no family and no future. The woman who had raised me, fed me, clothed me, loved me, even when I had made it difficult for her. The woman who had held me when I cried, who had cheered for me at school plays and graduations, who had taught me how to cook and how to drive and how to be a decent human being. The woman I had not spoken to in 3 years, not because of any argument or falling out, but because life had gotten in the way. Because I had moved away, gotten busy, let the distance between us grow until it felt insurmountable. And now she was dead, and I hadn't even known. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the word catching in my throat. "She was my mother." "What happened? When did she die? How did she die?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, the kind of pause that suggested the person on the phone was choosing their words carefully, measuring the weight of what they were about to say. "Mrs. Morrison passed away 2 weeks ago, after a long illness. I'm very sorry for your loss. The funeral was held last week, and she was laid to rest beside her husband in the family plot. We attempted to contact you earlier, but we had difficulty locating your current address." I closed my eyes, guilt washing over me like a wave. A long illness. She had been sick, and I hadn't known. She had been dying, and I hadn't been there. She had been buried, and I had missed the funeral, missed the chance to say goodbye, missed the opportunity to tell her that I loved her and that I was sorry for letting so much time pass without calling. I had moved 3 times in the past 3 years, and I hadn't always remembered to update my contact information with my parents. Not because I didn't care, but because I was disorganized, because I was busy, because I kept telling myself I would do it later, and later had never come. And now my mother was dead, and I would never get the chance to make things right. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking, tears already beginning to form in my eyes. I didn't know. I should have been there. I should have called more. I should have been a better daughter. "There's no need to apologize, Ms. Morrison," Whitmore said gently, his voice softening. "These things happen. What matters now is that we've located you, and there are some matters regarding your mother's estate that need to be discussed. Specifically, there is an item that your mother specified should be given to you. A family heirloom of considerable value. She was very insistent that it go to you, and only to you." I frowned, confusion cutting through my grief like a knife. A family heirloom? Given to me? It didn't make any sense. I was the adopted daughter, the one who had come to the Morrison family late, after the tragedy that had claimed my biological parents. I was not a blood relative. I had no claim to the family's history or its treasures. Those things belonged to the real Morrisons, to my adoptive siblings, to the children who had been born into the family with the right name and the right blood and the right everything. "I don't understand," I said, my voice thick with confusion and grief. "Why would she give me a family heirloom? What about Catherine and James? They're her biological children. Shouldn't the heirloom go to them? They're the real Morrisons. I'm just the adopted one." Another pause, longer this time, heavy with unspoken meaning. "Your mother was very specific in her instructions," Whitmore said, his voice careful and deliberate. "The heirloom in question is to be given to you, and only to you. Catherine and James are aware of this arrangement, and they have been informed that the item has been bequeathed to you. I would strongly recommend that you come to our office as soon as possible to discuss the matter in person. There are some complications that need to be addressed, and there is a letter, written by your mother, that she asked to be read in your presence." Complications. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. I knew my adoptive siblings well enough to imagine what those complications might be. Catherine, the eldest, had always resented me. She had been 14 when I arrived, old enough to understand that her parents were bringing a stranger into their home, and she had never quite forgiven them for it. She had made my life difficult in 1,000 small ways, from the cruel nicknames she invented to the way she excluded me from family activities and whispered about me behind my back. James, the middle child, had been more accepting on the surface, but his acceptance had always felt hollow, performative. He treated me with a polite indifference that made it clear I was a guest in their home, not a sister. They had tolerated me for the 11 years I lived under their roof, but we had never been close. And after I moved out, our contact had dwindled to the occasional birthday card and the even more occasional phone call. They were not my family. Not really. They were just the people I had grown up with. I agreed to meet with Whitmore the following day, and I spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze. My mother was dead. I had missed her funeral, and now I was being summoned to discuss a family heirloom that had apparently been given to me, over the objections of my adoptive siblings. It was a lot to process, and I wasn't sure I was equipped to handle any of it. The spreadsheet on my computer screen blurred in front of my eyes, the numbers and formulas losing all meaning. My coworkers must have noticed that something was wrong, because a few of them stopped by my desk to ask if I was okay. I told them I was fine, just tired, just had a headache. I didn't tell them the truth. I didn't tell them that my mother was dead and that I was drowning in guilt and confusion and a grief that I didn't know how to express. That evening, I called my best friend Sarah and told her everything. Sarah had known me since college, had been there through the ups and downs of my complicated relationship with my adoptive family. She had held my hand during my father's funeral, had listened to me vent about Catherine's cruelty and James's indifference, had never once judged me for the complicated feelings I had about the people who had raised me. She listened without interrupting as I poured out the story of the phone call, the lawyer, the heirloom, the letter. And when I finished, she said, very quietly, "You have to go. You have to find out what this heirloom is and why she gave it to you. It's important, Elena. It's a message from beyond the grave." "What kind of message?" I asked, my voice hollow and empty. I was the adopted daughter, the outsider, the one who never really belonged. Why would she give me something that should go to her real children? It doesn't make sense. "Maybe that's exactly the point," Sarah said. "Maybe she was trying to tell you something. Maybe she was trying to tell them something. Maybe there's more to this story than you know. You won't understand until you go. You won't understand until you hear what that letter says." I knew she was right. I had to go. I had to face Catherine and James, had to sit in that lawyer's office and listen to whatever my mother had written, had to claim the heirloom that had been given to me whether I understood it or not. It was the last thing my mother had wanted me to do, and I owed it to her to see it through. I owed it to her to be there, finally, after all the years of distance and silence. The law office of Whitmore and Associates was located in a sleek, modern building in the heart of the city's financial district, a tower of glass and steel that seemed designed to intimidate. I arrived the next morning wearing my best suit, the one I saved for job interviews and important meetings, and I felt completely out of place among the polished professionals who hurried through the marble lobby with their expensive briefcases and their confident strides. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect hair and a practiced smile, directed me to a conference room on the 23rd floor. The elevator ride seemed to take forever, each floor announcing itself with a soft chime, and by the time the doors opened, my palms were slick with sweat and my heart was pounding in my chest. The conference room was large and elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city skyline. A long mahogany table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by leather chairs that looked like they cost more than my entire wardrobe. And sitting at that table, waiting for me, were Catherine and James. Catherine looked exactly as I remembered her, though older and more severe. She was in her late 30s now, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun that accentuated the sharp angles of her face. She was wearing an expensive-looking designer dress, the kind that was tailored to fit perfectly and probably cost several $1,000s. Her expression was cold and unwelcoming, and when she saw me, her lips pressed together in a thin, disapproving line. James was more casual, dressed in jeans and a sweater, his posture slouched and his expression guarded. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept well in days, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of grief and stress. They both looked up when I entered, and I saw the same emotion flash across their faces. Resentment. The old, familiar resentment that I had been dealing with for most of my life. "Elena," Catherine said, her voice cool and clipped, the way she always sounded when she was angry but trying to maintain the appearance of politeness. "How nice of you to finally show up. We were beginning to wonder if you were going to bother. It's only been 3 years since you last spoke to any of us." I bit back the retort that rose to my lips, the sharp words that I wanted to throw back at her. "I came as soon as I could," I said, taking a seat at the far end of the table, as far from them as possible. "I didn't know about Mom's illness. I didn't know about the funeral. I didn't know about any of this until yesterday, when the lawyer called me." Catherine's eyes narrowed, and her voice dripped with contempt. 3 years. You didn't speak to her for 3 years. And now you show up, expecting to claim your inheritance. It's quite convenient, don't you think? Mom gets sick, Mom dies, and suddenly you're interested in the family again. Suddenly, you want to be part of things. It's almost like you only care about what you can get. The accusation stung, not because it was true, but because it contained just enough truth to hurt. I had been distant. I had been neglectful. I had let 3 years pass without seeing my mother, without calling her, without making any real effort to maintain our relationship. I had my reasons, or at least I told myself I did. Work was demanding. Life was complicated. The distance between our cities made visits difficult. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I had been afraid. Afraid of the rejection I had always felt from Catherine and James. afraid of the complicated emotions that always surfaced when I went home, afraid of being reminded, yet again, that I was the outsider, the charity case, the one who didn't really belong. "Catherine," James said, his voice quiet but firm. "This isn't the time or the place. We're all grieving. Mom just died. We should be supporting each other, not tearing each other apart." Catherine shot him a look, her eyes blazing. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's been disinherited. You're not the one who's been passed over in favor of her." She gestured at me dismissively, the way she always had, as if I were something unpleasant that had been dragged in from the street. "The family heirloom, James. The necklace that has been passed down from mother to daughter for 5 generations. And Mom gave it to her. The adopted one. The one who isn't even really part of this family." I sat in silence, absorbing the blows. They hurt. Of course they hurt, but they were also familiar. I had been hearing variations of this speech for most of my life, from Catherine and from the other members of the extended family who had never quite accepted me. The aunts and uncles who looked at me with barely concealed suspicion. The cousins who whispered behind my back. The grandparents who had always treated me as a temporary guest rather than a permanent member of the family. I was the outsider, the interloper, the one who didn't belong. And no matter how much my adoptive parents had loved me, no matter how much they had tried to make me feel like part of the family, there was always a part of me that knew the truth. I was not one of them. I never would be. But now, in death, my mother had reached out and claimed me as her own. She had given me the necklace, the symbol of family continuity and maternal love. And that, more than anything else, was the message I needed to hear. The door opened, and Jonathan Whitmore entered the room. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, with silver hair and a kind, intelligent face. He carried a leather briefcase and a stack of documents, and he greeted each of us in turn with the formal politeness of someone who had spent decades navigating the complicated waters of family disputes and estate settlements. He took his seat at the head of the table, placed his briefcase on the surface in front of him, and looked at each of us in turn. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm and measured. "I know this is a difficult time for all of you, and I appreciate your willingness to be here. As you know, Mrs. Morrison's estate is in the process of being settled. Most of the assets have been divided according to her will, and there are no disputes regarding those distributions. The house, the investments, the personal property, all of it has been allocated fairly and equitably. However, there is one item, a family heirloom, that Mrs. Morrison specified should be given to Elena. It is this item that we are here to discuss." He opened his briefcase and removed a small wooden box. It was old, the wood dark and polished with age, and it had a brass clasp that gleamed in the soft light of the conference room. He placed it on the table in front of him, and I felt my heart begin to pound. This was it, the heirloom, the thing that had been deemed important enough to give to me, the adopted daughter, over the objections of the biological children. The thing that had brought me here, to this room, to this confrontation with the siblings who had never accepted me. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, my eyes fixed on the box. Whitmore opened the box with careful, deliberate movements, and I saw what was inside. A necklace. A beautiful, breathtaking necklace, the kind of piece that belonged in a museum, with a delicate gold chain and a pendant that sparkled with diamonds and emeralds. The stones caught the light and scattered it into 1,000 tiny rainbows, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had never seen anything like it. It was more than just jewelry. It was art. It was history. It was the accumulated weight of 5 generations of Morrison women, all of them wearing this necklace on their wedding days, all of them passing it down to their daughters with love and pride. "This necklace has been in the Morrison family for 5 generations, Whitmore said, his voice quiet and reverent. "It was originally commissioned by your great-great-grandmother, Eleanor Morrison, in 1892. It has been passed down from mother to daughter ever since, a symbol of continuity and family pride." Mrs. Morrison was very clear in her instructions. She wanted this necklace to go to you, Elena, not to Catherine, not to James, to you, and only to you. The room fell silent. I stared at the necklace, my mind racing, my heart pounding. It was stunning, obviously valuable, the kind of heirloom that carried with it centuries of meaning and tradition. And it had been given to me. The adopted daughter. The outsider. The one who didn't belong. "This is ridiculous," Catherine said, her voice sharp with anger, cutting through the silence like a knife. "That necklace belongs to me. I'm the eldest daughter. I'm the one who should inherit it. It's been passed down from mother to daughter for generations, and I am the daughter, not her." She gestured at me, her hands slicing through the air. "She's not even really part of this family. She's just someone Mom and Dad took in out of pity. She has no right to that necklace. No right at all." "Catherine, that's enough," James said, but his voice lacked conviction. I could see the same resentment in his eyes, the same sense of betrayal. He was trying to be reasonable, trying to maintain the appearance of civility, but underneath it all, he was just as angry as Catherine. They both felt cheated. They both felt that something that should have been theirs had been stolen from them. "It's true," Catherine continued, ignoring him. "She's not a real Morrison. She never was. She was just a charity case, a stray that Mom and Dad picked up off the street. And now she's getting the family heirloom? It's an insult. It's an insult to our mother's memory, to our family's history, to everything that necklace represents." I sat in silence, letting the words wash over me. They stung, but I had heard worse. I had spent my entire life hearing variations of this speech, from Catherine and from the other members of the extended family who had never quite accepted me. I was used to it. I had built walls around myself to protect against it. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. That didn't mean I wasn't bleeding inside. "Your mother left a letter," Whitmore said, his voice cutting through Catherine's tirade with quiet authority. "She asked that it be read aloud in the presence of all three of you. She was very specific about this. She said it would explain everything. She said it would help you understand why she made the decisions she made." He produced an envelope from his briefcase and held it up so we could all see it. The paper was cream-colored and expensive, and my mother's name was written on the front in her elegant, sloping handwriting. "May I proceed?" Catherine fell silent, her jaw tight, her eyes blazing. James nodded slowly, and I sat very still, my heart pounding, my hands clasped in my lap, waiting. Whitmore opened the envelope with a silver letter opener, the sound of tearing paper loud in the quiet room. He removed several sheets of paper, unfolded them carefully, and began to read. "My dear children," the letter began, and the sound of my mother's words, spoken in a stranger's voice, brought fresh tears to my eyes. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are gathered together to settle the affairs of my estate. I know that the distribution of my assets has caused some controversy, particularly regarding the family necklace. I want to explain my decision, and I hope that you will understand. I hope that you will listen with open hearts and open minds, and that you will come away from this meeting with a new understanding of who you are and where you come from. I have loved all three of you with all my heart. You are my children, and nothing will ever change that. Catherine, you are my firstborn, my beautiful, stubborn, fiercely independent daughter. James, you are my son, my quiet, thoughtful, deeply compassionate boy. And Elena, you are my youngest, my precious girl, the child I chose to love and raise as my own. All three of you have brought me more joy than I ever thought possible, and I am grateful, every single day, for the gift of being your mother. But Elena, I need you to know something. Something I should have told you long ago. Something I kept secret for reasons that will become clear. You are not a stranger to this family. You are not an outsider. You are not a charity case or a stray or any of the other cruel words that have been used to describe you over the years. You are a Morrison by blood, just as much as Catherine and James. Your biological mother was my sister, my beloved younger sister, Sarah. When she died, when she was taken from us in that terrible accident, your father asked me to raise you. He was dying too, you see. He had been sick for a long time, and he knew he didn't have much time left. He asked me to take you in, to give you a home and a family and a future. And I agreed, not out of pity, but out of love. Because you were family. Because you have always been family. The words hit me like a thunderbolt. I stared at Whitmore, my mouth open, my mind reeling. My biological mother was Margaret's sister? That meant, that meant I wasn't adopted at all. Not in the way I had always believed. I was her niece, her blood relative, her family. The woman I had called mom for 25 years was actually my aunt, and she had never told me. The necklace was not meant for Catherine or James. The letter continued, and Whitmore's voice seemed to fade into the background as the meaning of the words washed over me. It was meant for you, Elena, because you are the daughter of my sister, and she would have wanted you to have it. She wore this necklace on her wedding day, just as I wore it on mine, just as our mother wore it before us. It is your birthright. It has always been your birthright. And I am sorry that I never told you the truth while I was alive. I wanted to. I almost did, so many times. But I was afraid. Afraid that the secret would put you in danger. Afraid that the people who had hurt your parents would come looking for you. And so I kept silent, and I let you believe that you were adopted, that you were an outsider, that you were not really one of us. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, and I have regretted it every single day. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, my shoulders shaking with sobs. All those years of feeling like an outsider, of believing that I didn't belong, and it had all been a lie. I was a Morrison. I had always been a Morrison. My mother, my real mother, had been a Morrison too. And the necklace, the beautiful, priceless necklace, was not a gift. It was a birthright. It was the thing that connected me to my past, to my family, to the history that I had never known I was part of. Catherine and James were staring at me, their faces pale with shock. Catherine's earlier anger had evaporated, replaced by confusion and something that might have been shame. James looked like he had been punched in the stomach, the air driven from his lungs. I didn't know. I whispered, my voice barely audible. I didn't know any of this. None of us did, James said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. Mom never told us. She kept it a secret from everyone, even from us. Because she was protecting you, Whitmore said gently. Your biological father was involved in some dangerous things. That's why you were placed with Margaret and her husband. To keep you safe. Margaret never told anyone the truth, not even her own children, because she was afraid that the information would put you in danger. She carried that secret for 25 years. She carried it to her grave. I thought about my adoptive father, the man I had called Dad until the day he died 10 years ago. He had known too. He had known that I was his niece, and he had treated me like a daughter anyway. They both had. They had given me a home, a family, a life, and they had never asked for anything in return. They had loved me unconditionally, even when I had made it difficult, even when I had pulled away and let the distance grow between us. They had loved me because I was family, because I had always been family. Whitmore pushed the box across the table toward me. This belongs to you, Elena. It always has. And now, at last, you know the truth. I reached out with trembling hands and lifted the necklace from the box. The gold chain was cool against my fingers, and the emeralds seemed to glow with an inner light. It was beautiful, but it was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a connection to my past, to my mother, to the grandmother and great-grandmother I had never known. It was proof that I belonged, that I had always belonged, that the blood of the Morrison family ran through my veins. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. Thank you for telling me the truth. Thank you for giving me back my family. Catherine stood up from her chair, and for a moment, I thought she was going to leave. But instead, she walked around the table and pulled me into an awkward embrace. Her body was stiff, her arms uncertain, but the gesture was genuine. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I'm sorry for everything I said. I'm sorry for the way I treated you all these years. I didn't know. I didn't understand. I didn't either, I said, hugging her back, feeling the tears soak into the shoulder of her expensive dress. But now we do, and we can move forward, together, as family. James joined us, wrapping his arms around both of us, and the three of us stood there in that conference room, holding each other, crying, finally united after years of distance and misunderstanding. The truth had been hidden for 25 years, but now it was out, and nothing would ever be the same. But maybe, I thought, that was a good thing. Maybe the truth was the one thing that could finally bring our fractured family together. The necklace hung around my neck as I walked out of that office, the weight of it both literal and symbolic. I was Elena Morrison. I was a daughter, a sister, a niece. I was part of a family that stretched back 5 generations, a family that had loved me even when I didn't know it, that had protected me even when I couldn't see it. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged.